Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 preview for Showdown and props today at the Procore Championship. Going to break down what to expect from course conditions today, as well as how to approach both of those slates, both from the Showdown and the prop side, as I said, to go out there and have yourself a Sunday. So wherever you guys are at, hopefully you're having a great Sunday morning. Got a little coffee in the cup. We're waking up over here on the East Coast. You got any questions? Throw them down to the live chat. I'll cover them as we see them. And of course, we'll go over all the usual here before lock. Let's go ahead and start it off with a look at our presenting sponsor for the live stream, which of course are our friends over there at the Ship It Nation. They are a great resource for all your needs on DFS, not just what we talk up here in the channel when it comes to golf and football. They've got you covered, whether it's college football, MMA, you've got baseball, basketball projections over there with the Ship It Nation. And the best part is you get all of those different sports with the membership there, and you're not going to get price gouged to death. They've got very reasonable prices over there, especially if you're more of a well-rounded DFS player that is playing a variety of different sports. They're a great community that helps teach you the process of going out there and playing, and also some really good projections across the board as well. So I used those last night out there for a little bit of MMA lineups. Wasn't the best slate, no takedown out there last night, but still very respectable even without some of the better fighters in my pool. So nothing but great things to say about the Ship It Nation crew over there. And make sure to check them out if you guys haven't already. Let's talk about this golf course a little bit, which today played, or should say yesterday, right, for round 3's action, played like we expected it to. We thought the morning wave would be easier than the afternoon. That was reflected with some of our exposure. We had a lot more of the morning wave than the PM wave, and it played over 0.7 shots easier. Now, days 1 and 2, the edge was a little bit larger. Day 1, it was about a 1-stroke difference, a little bit less than that. Day 2 was actually a little bit over a stroke difference. The reason why it wasn't as large of a differential yesterday was likely because of the talent level of the top level players. You had your players that were in form teeing off later, some of your better players in general that had a later tee time there yesterday. So even though it was only this 0.77 shot difference, and I'll put only in quotes there because a 0.77 shot difference is massive when it comes to a showdown slate, the conditions were likely even easier than what you saw out there for the morning guys. You had some blowups, just to show you what I'm talking about. You had guys like Doherty shoot +5. You had a lot of these real stinker performances from guys that were in that first half of tee time. So it still played 0.77 shots easier, and that was including all of these outliers towards the bottom. I think a Ben Coles might have been one of the only PM guys to go out there and blow up. And that isn't reflected out here with the shots gained metric. So the reason why I show you that is out here for the final days of action, we've got an even bigger weather situation. So if you thought those 0.7 shot differences, those 1-shot differences were massive, well, take a look at what we've got here for Sunday. We've got over 14 miles an hour of sustained winds starting there at 1 p.m. local time. It's going to be calm for most of the morning, like we've seen the entire week. Also going to be a little bit cooler early on. So it's going to, the temperature is going to rise as the day goes on. But if you're teeing off around a 9, maybe 9:30 a.m. local time, you're going to have most of your round in, a next to no wind out there. And you're also going to have much softer conditions. I mean, we've seen that the first 3 days. That's why you had a shot difference the first 2. It's why it was nearly actually a little bit over a 0.75 shot difference out there for round 3. And though round 4, we have the placement points to go out there and worry about, this kind of weather situation is going to heavily incentivize us to go after some early starters. So you're still going to need 2, probably 3 of the top 5 to go out there and take down something. But the first 3, or maybe your 3 guys you're using for leverage, should probably be early starters. If they're going to get a 0.75, a 1-shot advantage, they're also going to be lower owned because they're starting further down the board. But there's going to be a lot of utility in using those sort of players. So speaking of that, let's bring up our projections now. If there's any questions that you guys got, go ahead, let me know. And say hi down in live chat if you guys haven't already. I know it's Sunday morning, so a lot of you guys are probably still waking up. Some of you may watch this on replay. If that's fine, if that's the case, replay crew is more than welcome here at the live streams. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already as well. So we've got all the ownership on here. So for the sake of this live stream, I'm going to have everyone on the field on here, no one blacked out, just so that we could talk about the game theory a little bit. Because, if we just stuck to the guys that I was playing, there would be a few chalky pieces towards the top. Reality is, though, I'm going to have some chalk out there in my lineups, but there's some chalk that I'm going to be actively avoiding as well. So we'll have the ownership up here. We'll talk through some of the game theory as we go tier by tier, and then some of the highlighted plays I'm going to go through as well. Where we at? Yo, grinding it out in swing season on an NFL Sunday. You know it, dude. I've been doing this for years. The people that just watch golf when football's not around, in my opinion, aren't really golf fans. Like I see people all over the place, like especially in Twitter, they're like, "Oh, swing season. I can never watch that shit." Then you don't even like golf, right? Like, so I don't know. I'm about it. It's the same thing to me as one of those big events. Big event, you got some stars out there, maybe a little bit more star power, but there's still GPPs. There's still all those outright bets that we can cash. I don't get it, man. This is the time to love golf, especially if you're a big sicko like I am, because there's a huge edge to knowing some of the mid to lower tier players. And then also your competition doesn't give a fuck. I mean, this time of year, you put in the work, you go out there, you grind, you're going to get paid off for it because most people, like you said, it's NFL Sunday today, right? Not so much golf and NFL Sunday. And if people are going to treat it like that, if they're going to treat golf as their bastard son and not give it all their attention, then that'll take all their entry fees. I'm totally fine with it because those of us that have been grinding it out have had a good time with it. So welcome on in, Paul, and cheers to that. Hopefully you have a good Sunday yourself. Let's talk through this thing, though. So ownership on Sundays is usually pretty predictable. The reason why I say it's pretty predictable is you got to get some of those placement points involved. And what you get are the guys that are towards the top 5, top 10, much, much higher owned than the rest of their peers. So, for example, Sahith is over 25%, but Corey Connors is up there at minus 13, is even higher owned than what we have with Sahith and nearly 36% owned himself. Mackenzie Hughes, you can see I've got over 30%. Patrick Fishburne, who, by the way, is probably way too expensive for the kind of talent level he is. You see, I've got him there at just over 28% himself. So you're going to have to make some tough decisions towards the top end of the board. And I'll just tell you, out of those players that we've pointed out, I'm fading half those guys that are over that 25% mark. Now, I still have a Sahith, a Mackenzie Hughes in the player pool. Heck, even a Matt Kuchar at like 20%, I would call relatively chalky. But if I'm going to take a stand on somebody to hold their top 3, top 5 positioning, it's going to be one of these top tier players. What you'll see as we go a little bit further down the board is that you're going to have pieces like Pan Kazire, who of course has the massive lead. I've got well over 36% ownership. You've got a David Lipsky that's going to be super chalky towards the bottom, Grayson Sig. A lot of the faces that are up there starting in the top 10, that would include a Smotherman, a Highsmith, a Brandon Wu, also a Wilson Furr down here at $6,100. I'm playing none of those players. In fact, every single chalky guy from, $8,000 and below, I guess, I'm fading every single one of those chalkier options. Towards the top end of the board, I think you can substantiate or at least, make sense going out there and trying to take 40, 50% of one of these players as they're a stud. I mean, playing 50% of Sahith, you'd be pretty comfortable with. Same thing you with like a Mackenzie Hughes or a Matt Kuchar. If you use them in like 40% of your lineups, you're at the very least getting one of the top 15 players that made the cut. You're down here taking a Kazire in half your lineups or a Silverman or a David Lipsky, for example. It's going to feel a whole lot different. These are pure slappies. These are guys that hardly are even on the PGA Tour at this point. That's why they're playing during the fall, right? They're going out there trying to earn their playing privileges. And while a few of them could get there, their hit rate isn't going to be anywhere near 50%, the kind of number that you need to get leverage on them. So that's why up top, I'm a lot more willing to take some of these chalky pieces and why towards the middle to bottom end of the board, then I'm going out there and trying to differentiate so much because down low, I know that some of that chalk is way over-owned, whereas towards the top end of the board, you could say that it's probably right where it should be on a lot of those players. So that's usually the strategy for Sunday Showdown. You got to try and find a blend of some of that chalk up top and then try and find some middle to lower guys that you can use for some leverage. So let's talk about the Sahith. So he's been playing really solid this week, especially when it comes to his tee to green. Yet he hasn't had as many pop performances with the putter as we probably would have hoped for. So Sahith's the kind of player that can just get the putter working in a hurry. He's not the kind of guy that necessarily needs momentum with the flat stick to go out there and want to play him. So to this point of the week, just to give you the stats over the first 3 days, he's gaining about a stroke per round with the putter, which is, not terrible, but in this kind of field, he would be expecting to gain a little bit more than a stroke per round. Ball striking wise, though, gaining over 2 strokes per round. So that is pretty much right right where we'd expect it. He's had better weeks with the ball striking for sure, especially considering that this is a weaker field event, but he's playing the kind of golf that is extremely sustainable. He's gaining in 3 of the 4 categories. He's just a slight loser around the green. That is the only category that he's losing to over the first 3 days. So you go out there, you maybe give him a pop putting day. Maybe it's a pop ball striking day where he goes out there and has one of the better iron rounds. He does either of those things, just continue to be solid in the other shots gained categories. And that's like a -6, -7 rounds. And the reason why I'm talking about shots gained metrics and scoring is it's not just going to be about placement points today. I mentioned, needing 2-3 guys towards the top. Those players that are going to get you those top 5 placement points had still better go out there and shoot -4, -5. Heck, maybe even -5, -6 to go out there and make the optimal lineup. Even with some windy conditions, you're going to see some scoring around an easy short golf course like what we have here with Silverado. And that's why the chalk down low isn't the best play, because starting in the top 5 or even holding on to the lead out there with Patton might not be enough to make the large field GPP, or at least the optimal out there in the large field GPP. Because of the scoring that you have here. We're going to have players that shoot -5, -6, and that get those placement points, and that's what you're going to need. So that's why I like a Sahith. He's the best player in this field. He's got some of the best form of anyone in the field. And compared to a Corey Connors, he's a little bit low owned. Now, I can't tip my hands completely on whether I'm using Corey or not. If you guys want to see my entire player pool, that's what the Patreon page is for. Of course, link in the description of the video will take you to that. If you want to go out there and join the Patreon page. But Sahith, if we're just like trying to find my favorite spend up option, he is certainly my favorite spend up option out of the few that I have up top. I've also got Mackenzie Hughes at some relatively inflated ownership too. So $9,100. Reason why you'd like a Mackenzie Hughes is exactly why we played him yesterday, and he had that massive -6 round. The ball striking stats have been some of the best in the entire field. And to this point, he's gaining over 2.5 strokes ball striking per round. So the short game has been decent. He's gaining about 1/2 stroke per round putting per round, and about 1/3 of a stroke around the green, which is actually about average for Mackenzie Hughes. He's one of the best short game players on the PGA Tour, but this week, the irons have been unbelievable. In fact, if we take a look at the players that made the cut, he is number 2 in the field when it comes to shots gained approach. So that's only behind Grayson Sigg, by the way, who's number 1 in shots gained approach over the first 3 rounds. Mackenzie Hughes, though, you want to tail this guy when he's hitting the irons well. You go out there, you give me a guy that's gaining over a stroke per round with the irons. Normally, Mackenzie Hughes is gaining 2-3 strokes with a putter. So, you find some magic with those 2 categories, and that's how he shoots a -6 yesterday. Now, could he fall off the planet, go out there and be a fade today? For sure, right? I don't want to act like he's, completely quote-unquote safe out there in lineups. But if I'm going to take a stand up top, if I'm going to take a guy in 50% of my lineups, like you're going to have to do to get leverage on a 31% owned player, I'd rather it be a ball striker, a guy who's one of the better players in the field to begin with, out there with a Mackenzie Hughes, than some slapdick like a David Lipsky down low. So that's the thought process with Hughes. He's got the kind of ball striking stats that I want, and one of my conviction plays towards the top end of the board. Matt Kuchar, same exact thing. He's a little bit lower owned because he's starting there at -10. But with Matt Kuchar, you're getting the same kind of stat profile. So if we go ahead, take a look at the stats over the first 3 days, he's gaining 1.5 strokes per round when it comes to the approach play. A slight positive off the tee, so it hasn't been a huge positive for him, but is at least into the positive when it comes to the shots gained off the tee. And then the short game, which is normally Matt Kuchar's strength, he's just a slight gainer around the green, which is also, I would say, a little bit below his standards. And he's only gaining about 1/2 stroke putting per round as well. So kind of like a Mackenzie Hughes, the kind of short game specialist that we could see some positive regression from. And if he goes out there and continues to hit the ball like he has for the first few days, well, that's where he could go out there and get that super low round. So yesterday he had a double bogey on a par 5. So he shot even par. Score looked a lot worse than what it was in reality. You take out that double bogey, heck, you even give him a birdie on that par 5, and he shot -3 yesterday and would also be up there at -13 and just 1 shot off of second place. So obviously that's not the reality that we live in. The multiple worlds theory, right, doesn't apply to us. We're not on the timeline where Matt Kuchar makes a birdie on 12 as opposed to making a double bogey. But at the same time, he's playing solid golf, right? It was only 1 real hole that went out there and derailed him yesterday. You're giving me some placement point potential, a guy that I liked heading into the week that's also hitting the ball well. And you can see why I want to play him at about 20%. And now that we've talked about pretty much all the chalky guys I want to take, You could, in theory, right, try and take somebody that's like maybe a Silverman wouldn't be like the worst play at 18%. Like you could take somebody that's like 10, 12, maybe even like 14% owned down here in the 7K range. But for the sake of this live stream and the sake of my exposure, we're only going to talk about pivots from here on out. So let me catch up on chat, see if there were any questions that you guys had about the top end of the board. Because when we talk about these value plays, this is where the leverage is going to come in and where you're going to get uniqueness. You're going to make sure you don't duplicate yourself, and ultimately where you probably win the GPP. What's going on, Hef? Says Steelers versus Broncos. TG Watt is going to send Bo Nix to the Shadow Realm. For sure. I'm looking forward to it, too. Should be a good game, I would say. Steelers with Justin Fields. If we're going to win games, it's not going to be by much because of the offensive production. So, yeah, should be a good game. 4:30 start, so I get to enjoy the 1 o'clock action a little bit more than I would otherwise. So what's going on, Paul? Patton is not somebody you trust to get over the finish line. I agree with that. How far back has a realistic shot to win? So, yeah, so you're looking at the minus 13s to make a potential run. Minus 13 is definitely in play. If Pan Kazire shoots over par, which is well within his range of outcomes with the kind of player that he is, I would even throw it back to like the minus 10 range. Now, he would need some help from Pan, right? If Matt Kuchar was going to go out there and win this event, but I wouldn't put it outside the realm of possibility. I know that he's starting, how many shots back would that be? That would be starting, 8 shots back? Where's Pan? Yeah, so he's 18 under. And is that correct, by the way? Let me double check that. Yeah, he's 18 under par. He's starting 8 back. If Pan shoots 3 over, I mean, Kuchar could shoot minus 6, right? Go out there and get to, something like a minus 15, minus 16, I guess, if he went out there and shot minus 6. Yeah, probably the minus 13s are where you want to live if you're going out there and like live betting. Minus 12 for Thagala too. Like, I guess you'd include him there. I guess if you're going to include the minus 13s, you might as well include the minus 12s. Something around there. All right, let's talk through the bottom end of the board. So we've talked about some of our spend ups, the spots where we're going to be taking ad inflated ownership, and now we're going to be a little bit more sneaky here. So with Michael Thor Bjornsson, you're not getting as much top 3 potential, but if he goes out there, he shoots minus 4, minus 5, that's almost for sure a top 10, if not getting close to the top 7, top 5. So at 12.8% ownership, another guy that I loved heading into the week. He's played pretty decently over the first 3 rounds as well. He's a long player off the tee, the kind of guy that has a lot of scoring potential because of the kind of skill set that he has. And in Showdown, you're going to need some good scores. As I said, the placement points matter for a few of your top end options, at least. I think if you're playing this slate the right way, right? I don't think you should be taking your conviction plays down low. If you're going to find a score, Michael Thor Bjornsson is the kind of guy you need to go out there and shoot minus 5, minus 6. And considering that he's got all that scoring ability, I think that's within his range of outcomes. And only 12.8% ownership, you're also going to get a little bit different there. John Kiefer, we can say a lot of the same things about. In fact, I think we've talked up Kiefer or Thor Bjornsson or both of them in pretty much every Showdown slate this week because they're the perfect Showdown sort of plays. They're both in that same score. They're minus 9. Even for rounds 2 and 3 Showdown, I wanted to get to a Kiefer and Thor as much as humanly possible as they're high scoring players. They're aggressive players. They're young. They're long off the tee. They have a lot of the characteristics that we're looking for to take advantage of the par 5s. When you've got 4 par 5s in play, that's huge to go out there, potentially even try and take down an eagle. And you're getting sub 10% ownership out there on Kiefer. So I didn't play him in main slate this week. It looks like the kid's a stud, like a lot of people were talking about. I was more so interested out there from the Showdown angle. Rounds 2 and 3, it paid off pretty well. He's played pretty well to this point of the week. Sunday Showdown, he's also under that 10% ownership mark. So why not try and take him for a little bit of leverage there in that 7K range. I also like a Chandler Phillips. He's at minus 7, so a couple shots back of where you had Thor and Kiefer, but I've got him at sub 5% ownership. So the further and further down the board that you go, the earlier tee time that you're getting and the lower ownership mark. So as I mentioned with that weather edge before, I do think that the earlier starters are going to get the better side of conditions. So taking, maybe even an earlier starter than Phillips, for example, isn't the worst idea whatsoever. It's giving you that leverage. You're getting a guy that's going to have a better chance to go out there and score. And that's what I'm doing mostly with my options down low. So you'll see a Zach Blair, he's minus 8. Doesn't necessarily have like a super early tee time. So the players that I'm showing in this live stream aren't like the super mega pivots that I'm getting to, but you know for sure that there are some real nasty players that I'm taking. Like even a Sangmu Bay, he's minus 7. He's won at this golf course before, by the way. So that's half the reason I want to get to him out there at sub 5% ownership. But I've got some real nasty plays down there in my player pool. So like I guess just to point out a few, like a Nick Hardy is well within play out here for tomorrow's Showdown slate. There's an Aaron Baddeley at -3. Super early tee time could fill it up with a flat stick. Like there are some real just crappy players, guys that haven't played that well so far, that you might want to consider out there in your lineups. Like an Andrew Putnam, I don't think is out of play. A Doug Gimmett -4. Like we didn't point out all the options that I'm getting to. Of course, guys, right? Patreon page has everything uncensored that you can see here on the spreadsheet. But on top of taking some of these guys that are like kind of pivots, like these like -7, these -8s that are sub 10% owned, don't be shy because of that weather edge that we mentioned to go out there and take some real nasty plays towards the bottom. In my opinion, the placement point potential of some of these guys like a Zach Blair, even like a Chandler Phillips at -7, they're a little bit higher owned, and I get why they have slightly more placement point potential, but I don't think it's that big a deal. Like these guys, like a Nick Hardy, for example, and Aaron Baddeley, they're at 1.5% ownership. I mean, you just need these guys to shoot -5, -6. Like it doesn't matter if they're going to finish in, let's say, a T12 as opposed to T20. That's like a half a point difference when it comes to your DraftKings score. The far more important aspect is actually getting to that -5, that -6 score. Going out there and making 5, 6 birdies out there in your round is actually how you're going to get to the optimal lineup. So that's what I'll say about this bottom tier range, is that even though like our highlighted plays here maybe weren't as different, my player pool has some absolutely disgusting players out there in it. And if you're playing Sunday Showdown, especially the big $5 or big $25 today, you should probably have a lot of those same sort of players. Who's the guy that is jumping into the top 10? I wish I knew. I wish I had a crystal ball for you. If I had to take my best guess at it, it would be like a guy like a Thor or a Kiefer. If these sort of players can shoot that -5, -6 that we need to be in the optimal lineup, then they're probably going to be in that top 10. So I don't know who it's going to be. If I did, I would lock them out there in my Showdown lineups, as that would be one of the better plays of the slate. But if I'm going to give you a sort of player, probably that kind of thing, somebody starting at like -8, -9, that can go out there and have himself a day. What we're going to do now is we're going to build a lineup or two together, give you guys some of the thought process when going out there and building GPP builds. So what we're going to start with is be like the big $5 or big $25 GPP, and how you could get different and ensure you're not going to duplicate yourself with a bunch of other lineups. So we're going to use some of our chalk up top. That's really what I'm doing in most builds out here for today, whether it would be a single entry, whether it would be a large field GPP. Majority of my placement points, in fact, all of them, are going to be towards the top end of the board. So just for the sake of this, we're going to start with a really chalky start, just to prove a point, to show you that it doesn't matter really the chalk that you're taking up top when you have 3 other spots to differentiate yourself. So we're at about $7 grand remaining per player. And if you're in the big $5 or $25, using your, those -7, -8s that I pointed out. So like a Zach Blair, a few of the other guys like a Thor Bjornsson, Kiefer out there in that 7K range. I like those a little bit more in like single entries or some of your smaller field GPPs. And the large field GPP, this is where I really like to get different. This is where I like to point in or use guys like an Aaron Baddeley that is, on there at -3 as one of the first tee times of the day down there. Down here in the 6K range, rather than taking somebody that's like a Zach Blair at -8, this is where maybe you push the envelope a little bit and you use a Chesson Hadley that's got an earlier tee time. So in the big $5, big $25, I think this is where you really want to force your hand a little bit, go out there and try and get some sub 5%ers. Like your last man in here, for example, a Bud Cauley, who, by the way, I'm playing out there in my Showdown lineups for today. I think he makes a lot of sense, somebody to try and move into that top 10. However, in a large $5, big $25 contest, I'm not sure I would use him to round off this kind of lineup because of the chalk that we have up top. So what you might want to consider here would be leaving some salary on the table or just trying to take somebody that's lower owned. So if you're going to take a lower owned option, I guess Lanto Griffin would fit that kind of build. You could leave some salary on the table, maybe play a Martin Laird. You could leave a little bit more salary on the table, go down here to like $7 grand, take somebody like a Chad Ramey would be an extremely low owned option out there for your Showdown lineups. But depending on the kind of contests you're entering, you've got to cater your lineup and your build to that. For example, like if this was a single entry, or this was even like a 2,000 entry GPP, which isn't that much in the grand scheme of things, 2,000 entries, maybe I could use a Bud Cauley here because we do have sub 5% owned Baddeley. I believe sub 5% owned Chesson Hadley as well down there in that lineup. If this isn't the big 5 or 25, you get away with having 2 pivots in a lineup. So the reason why I wanted to start with these 3 chalky guys is to show you that it's not as difficult to get that differentiation that you're looking for, particularly if you're not playing the Panic Desires, the David Lipskys, the Wilson Furs, all of those sort of slappies towards the bottom end of the board. They're going to be like 25 to 35% owned. If you are, then good luck. And let me just show you why I say good luck, right? So if you're going to start, let's just throw in some of like the worst plays. So let's throw in Kazire. We're going to throw in Lipsky into this kind of lineup. If you're going to use these slappies down low, like where's your leverage going to come from? That's where the issue arises, because like even up top, if you think you're going to get cute and take like a Luke Clanton with some of those chalky guys down there, maybe in this 8K range, you go, oh, I'm so smart. I'm going to take Chan Kim out there in that range. He's slightly lower. And by the way, I like Chan Kim today. I'm playing him, so I don't want to completely talk shit about him. But the point being, you've got 2 like relatively low-owned guys towards the top, but Clan's still like 15-16%. Chan Kim is still well over 15% ownership. So in this lineup so far, we've got a 36-38%er, might even be 40% plus out there in some contests out there with Penn. You've got over 25% with Lipsky, which by the way might be 30% plus out there in some contests. And you've got a 16 and a 15%er. So we've got 15% plus ownership in all 4 spots, product ownership that is through the roof, and only 2 spots to get different. And we're at $7,800 remaining. So unless you went like Matthias Schmid and then maybe a Joel Damon, and this would be pushing it out there in the large field GPP. And I was taking literally the biggest pivots humanly imaginable out there with our last 2 spots. So this is the issue with going out there and starting with some of those chalkier players down low, is it corners you into a situation where unless you just get mega different or leave a bunch of salary on the table, that you're going to have issues with duplicating and then also issues with getting some leverage. So that's what I'll say about building your lineups for today, is that you need a good blend of that chalk up top and those leverage plays. And I think the way to do it, the way that I almost always do it out there for round 4 showdown, is take that chalk up top and get different down low. If you're going to go ahead and take some chalk down low, well, top, the middle end of the board for you absolutely has to be extremely different to the rest of the field. So that's all I'll say about it. We're going to talk about some props now and whatnot, but if you're just here for DFS and you have any last-second questions, go ahead, fire those down in the chat. If that's all you're here for, go ahead, smash like button before you guys hop on out of here, and we're going to talk some prop stuff now. So let me bring up our prop projections, which I'll bring up on my notepad real quick, and we'll share our screen so you can see what we're talking about. We're going to start with the PGA. I've got a bunch of props that we've already entered there, so we'll go through some of the exposure that's still on the board. But then we've also got this live board that we can go through, which, by the way, live golf out there for round 2 for live. Saturday's action, right there, 1 day behind the other golf tours, was unbelievably good. We hit at over a 80% rate. Golf course did play a lot easier than round 1, which was what we expected out there in the live stream. So we will talk about that later. I have a hot take for that as well. I think it's going to play even easier out there for Sunday. But on the PGA side, I think that these scoring averages are really going to change based on when somebody is teeing off. And if you're just joining us, I actually want to circle back to Google Chrome real quick to show you guys why this matters, because it's not just for DFS that we have to worry about the weather. It's especially on the prop side as well. Days 1 through 3, we've essentially seen 2 courses every single day, the course in the morning and the course in the afternoon. Course in the morning, the first day, played nearly a stroke easier than one in the afternoon. Birdie average was nearly a half a birdie higher, and your bogey average was also significantly higher out there in the PM wave. Second day, about a 1-shot difference. In fact, a little bit over a 1-shot difference there. Same trends with the birdie and bogey averages. And then round 3, even with the leaders in the last half of tee times, even with your best players out there in the last few groups, it was still over a 0.75 shot difference between the morning and the afternoon. So when we circle back to these averages, when we take a look at the numbers out there from rounds 1 and 3, you have to take them with a grain of salt and know that the morning guys are likely going to play a little bit easier than this 1 under par average. In fact, it might even play like a stroke and a half under par. Your birdie average for the morning guys is probably closer to like 4.5 per round. Your bogey average is probably getting closer to 2.6, maybe 2.5 per round out there for the morning guys. Whereas the afternoon plays closer to even par, right? Plays just a little bit under par out there for your last few groups out there. Birdie average goes down a little bit. Your bogey average actually goes up a little bit out there in that kind of situation. And if you're treating the board and you're using like these baseline averages to go out there and do your analysis, you're not doing it right. You need to be considering when they're teeing off. If they're in the middle tee times, then maybe you can use these averages, right? If they're teeing off at, let's say, like, 11:30, maybe 12 local time, right? Smack dab in the middle of when winds are going to kick up, maybe you could use these averages. But if you're looking at a super early starter or a super late starter, like some of the guys like a Pankazire or a Lipsky, then you better be treating them differently. So that's why I bring these averages up. We'll refer to them here in a few minutes. Most important thing to note, 4.3 birdie average. We'll definitely need that here in a few minutes. And then I guess green regulation 12.5 isn't the worst number to have in the back of your head. So let me bring up, we'll start with Underdog, I guess. Then we'll go to Prize Picks afterwards, give you guys some exposure. And we're going to pick my top 2 props here in Underdog. I've got 4 in so far. Haven't gone crazy on the PGA side. I think that Prize Picks with the live board and the PGA board is probably a little bit better value, as you can combine the 2 sites, combine the 2 leagues, and get a full 3x payout. But let's go through a few of the props that I took here. And FanDuel did have some odds up last night, but I want to see if any of the odds have moved a little bit. They posted them real late. I don't imagine there was a ton of action coming in on them out there at like midnight, just because I don't know how many people were up and looking at the golf boards. But let me see if they've done anything with the odds here. Draftkings didn't have anything up. Maybe that changed since then, but I know for a fact you have it here on FanDuel. And let's see what we're working with. So Kuchar, minus 140 towards the under. That is the same number he was at last night. In fact, looking at these odds, it doesn't look like there's been much movement or really anything over here on the FanDuel side. So birdies are better. They didn't have up last night, so I do want to look at that. Corey Connors juiced way over at 4.5. Let's see, Mackenzie Hughes a little bit over at 4.5. A Fishburne a little bit under, which makes sense. And then let's see, under 4.5 for Kazire is minus 190. Oh wow! And then Sahith is at 5.5 birdies, way higher than the rest of the field, which, by the way, this is half the reason I want to play him in Showdown. His birdie projection is a whole 1 birdie higher than anyone else that we have to compare to. That's an entire birdie higher than a Corey Connors, for example. That really matters out there from projection standpoint. So in terms of what I want to point out here, I just wanted to look at those odds real quick. Let's see, did they bump Matt Kuchar? Okay, so they bumped that prop. That's okay, so we don't have to take that one. Let's Pankazire, let's fade the David Lipsky prop that I took. And then what was the other under that I took? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Sorry, it's this Luke Clanton prop. So let's yesterday, by the way, Luke Clanton completely sold for us. He was a prop that we took for an under 69.5 strokes. I'm going right back to the well, because if you guys were tracking him hole by hole, the kid just could not make a putt for his life. He had 5 10-footers pretty much the entire round. Last time I checked, he missed 4 of those. He had 1 miss from like 3 feet out there for birdie, and he only birdied, I believe, 1 of the par 5s. So he's the kind of player, by the way, who, if you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, is number 1 in the field when it comes to birdie or better percentage. Literally no one else in the field has made more birdies than Luke Clanton on the PGA Tour since he came out here about a month and a half ago. And what I like about it is if you compare it to the Prize Picks line, now I don't have the Prize Picks board up quite yet. I'm going to bring it up here in a minute. He was at 5 birdies last night. So you had the 0.5 birdie discrepancy in our favor towards the over and a 1.1x multiplier. And the thing about Luke Clanton that I think makes the birdies the right play here, not so much the strokes, he is at 70.5 strokes. So I think an under there could also makes sense for mixing it in. The reason why I took birdies is the winds are going to be a little bit higher today. And because he's not in contention, he's going to be extremely aggressive. He's got to make up a bunch of strokes to try and get up there towards the top 10. At this point, he's trying to get as many FedEx Cup points as possible. Because I think if he gets a certain amount, a certain designation, he earns a tour card automatically. And that's all he cares about, right? He doesn't care if he finishes in last. You know, he's not a professional. He's not a part of this FedEx Cup fall swing quite yet. So he's trying to earn that ability. And, if he finishes last, doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? It's not going to change his financial situation. What really could change his situation going forward would be if he goes out there and he shoots like a -6, -7 round and gets some of those FedEx Cup points. So that's what I'll say about Luke Clanton. He's, again, your top birdie maker out here in the field, and he's 0.5 higher. This David Lipsky prop was also 0.5 higher over there on Prize Picks. And then his line over here on the FanDuel board, I believe he's at 71.5. And at least last night, he was close to even money. So let's see. So yeah, he's pretty close to even money still out there at 71.5. The reason why I like this fade in particular, though, is how he played in round 3. So if we take a look at the shots gained profile over here for David Lipsky, you see that he lost off the tee, he lost on approach, and then he gained 2 strokes putting. If there's one thing that we know about David Lipsky is that he's normally one of the worst putters on the PGA Tour. So unless he goes out there and he's able to replicate this really good putting performance, he's not going to shoot -2, right? If he's even a neutral putter, which for David Lipsky would actually be a good day compared to his career baseline, a neutral putter is an even par day for him, which would be over his line that we took. So I like the push equity there at -1. If he happens to shoot under par, we'd get a refund with a -1 score, with anything even par or worse being a hit. And just to remind you guys, scoring average in the afternoon, yesterday it was 0.71 under par. Day 2, 0.5 under par. Day 1, it was only 0.14 under par. You give these guys some real wind, like they're going to see this afternoon, right? When he tees off, it's going to be 14 to 15 miles an hour. You give me a baked out golf course and somebody who can't hit the golf ball. Let's even look at round 2. Like round 2 was a little bit better, but he still lost off the tee and really carried himself with the putter. Unless he can keep this putter going, which, like I said, it's just hard to imagine that he does. And the kind of putter that he is long-term, he's in for a lot of trouble out there on Sunday. So that's why I like the over on David Lipsky. If you do this, by the way, it is a 3.56x payout. So you get quite the little extra payout boost by going out there and taking an over and an under together. So might want to check that one out. Let me bring up Prize Picks now. Reason why we can't bring up Prize Picks before we talk about it is if I do, it blocks me from looking at the site. No idea why they do that, by the way. I'm assuming it has something to do with like data scraping, but just ridiculous overextension, I would say, of their security. But let's look at some of these props here. So Luke Clanton, there's the 5 birdie prop that I was talking about before. And David Lipsky, I believe, is, up here at 71.5 strokes. So if you're into 0.5 discrepancies, you've got that on both props that we took. And now let's talk a little bit about what I'm attacking over here on this side. So the 2 props that we're going to do here for the live stream, of course, guys, just like my player pool, we talked about a few players that I'm getting to in my Showdown exposure. For all of the exposure that I'm getting to on props, make sure to check out the Patreon. That's where I'm posting all of these as I'm entering them and as I get to more exposure here this morning. But the one prop I want to take here for Live Golf, which, by the way, I'll show you the weather for Live Golf. It looks beautiful. And I know before I mentioned a little bit about a hot take for today, the winds look lower. It looks completely clear. I think the scoring average for Live is going to be the same as what we had for yesterday on round 2, if not slightly better than our round 2 averages. And I'll bring up the averages just one more time to remind ourselves of why we're taking what we are. But what you'll see here with the Live averages is the birdie average was just under 3 per round, 3.5 per round. Stroke average was just better than 0.5 over par. I think it could be maybe 0.25 shots easier when it comes to your scoring average. And the birdie average probably going to stay around 3.5, maybe slightly goes up to like 3.6 per round. But when you take a look at this board over here on Prize Picks, there are some definite misprices if it's going to play just as easy, if not easier. Most notable, in my opinion, would be somebody like an Abraham Answer when it comes to his birdie line, as he's a top 7 birdie maker on the Live Tour. For the year, he makes over 4.4 birdies per round, which is a whole 0.6 birdies higher than the Live Tour average. So he's normally gaining about 0.6 birdies to the field. And if the birdie average is going to be like 3.5, well, that would put him at like a 4.1 projection, which is well over this 3.5 mark. There are a few other guys at 3.5 you could say that about as well. So before lock, I'll likely try and add a few more guys for some overs on birdies. But if the conditions are going to cooperate, like it looks like it's going to, out here with sub 8 miles an hour of wind, birdie average to the field is like 3.5. There are some well above average birdie makers that they have at that number. So I would say that my hot take for Live Golf is that just like it was for round 2, I think it'll be a moneymaker out here for Sunday, especially if you take some overs on the right sort of players. And Abraham Answer would certainly be one of those candidates. What I'm pairing him with would be an under on birdies. So let's see. Yeah, so they still have Kevin Tway at this number. Kevin Tway is the one that I used for my pairing, but there were also be quite a few that end up adding this morning. The reason why I picked on Kevin Tway in particular last night is because he's got a later tee time. So he's teeing off at about noon local time over there in Silverado. He's also coming into this week with one of the bottom 10 birdie or better percentages of any of the players in this field. And considering how weak the field is, that essentially means he's coming in with some of the worst form, I should say, of anyone in the world. So Kevin Tway at 4.5 birdies. Birdie average was already below 4.5 today. You add on the fact that he's teeing off on the much harder side of tee times, where again, the winds are really going to kick up out here this afternoon, and it makes a whole lot of sense to try and take his under. So you usually get harder pins on Sunday. I think that could lead to a slightly lower birdie average, but those winds that they're going to be playing in are also going to be wreaking some havoc out there for the latter half of tee time. So this pays 3x because you have a live golf prop and a PGA prop mixed in together, which is likely what I'm going to do for most of my exposure. The payouts, if you correlate anything here on Prize Picks, are sub-ideal to say the least, especially if you go out there and you take two fades together. So a quick fix for that is, especially when you have two events to work with, is to mix in different types of exposure. So that's what I'll be doing over there on the Patreon page. Make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. And that's all I've got for the live stream. So hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for all of your exposure today. Go out there, take down a GPP or two for me, make your boy proud. Also cash out on any of the prop slips that you're entering, and make sure to check out the Patreon page for all the behind the scenes content. That will include the spreadsheet that you guys saw out there for DFS. Join the DFS tier to go out there and get that. It is $15 a month to join that. And of course, over there for the prop side of things, we've got that tier for the Underdog and Prize Pick stuff. So it's $15 for either of those tiers. Go out there, check it out if you guys haven't already. And we've also got some NFL going on. So I've got to get some prop slips in. I've got to get my NFL projections done out there before lock. But a busy day for us DFS fans, us sports fans in general, but wouldn't trade it for anything. This is the best time of year. We've got so much going on. It's pretty awesome. Let's make it a good Sunday. So go Steelers. Best of luck with your exposure, guys, and let's get it for this week.